in our last video is from a Tozy, and it is about OnlyFans. Because for those of you who don't know, yes, for those of you who don't know, uh, the man behind the business passed away of cancer shortly ago. And now it's kind of in limbo about what's happening with this website. Is it being shut down? What's going on? We're about to find out right now.
Dominated by how much some top earners are making on. But what hasn't really been discussed is how the company has lost billions of dollars in valuation in a very short amount of time. And things just got even more messy because is now in a very bad situation after the CEO passed away. So essentially, you have one of the biggest platforms in the world, especially when it comes.
And I heard he paid like $30 million for this when it first popped out. And now it's worth like $7 billion.
Profitability per employee metric that you've probably
It's like the most
online.
profitable company
And
of
they just lost
ever.
one person running it, and almost nobody knew who he really was and that he existed. So the dude,
that would be an issue for them.
There's really no real footage of him online, and one of the only pictures of him online.
And to be honest with you, sorry I'm pausing a lot. I'll let it roll in a second. But to be honest with you, I kind of feel like OnlyFans is going to go downhill anyways, especially because of something called AI. Because now there's going to be those perverted incel nasty men. They're going to make little women characters. And then these characters, they don't age. They look the same. AI is so advanced that they look like a real person that they're just going to push real girls to the side. And then you're going to have all these men with artificial characters that they made through AI making all this money. That's what I think is really going to happen. So I don't even know if this is going to be that big of a deal.
Was the one from his LinkedIn that had no ties to the platform whatsoever. So that's a little bit interesting. But for years, he was quietly making billions running one of the most controversial platforms on the internet.
Right, there you go.
But then, in just the last month, he passed away and left the entire business in limbo. So, I mean, to catch everyone up to speed here, OF was created in 2016 by a guy named Tim Stokely. He was the youngest in the family from Essex, England. And he spent years trying to launch internet business after internet business and had a whole lot of failures. And the guy burned through a whole bunch of his own money and goodwill from friends and family, to put it lightly. But his dad, Guy, real name by the way, he watched multiple projects go essentially nowhere and had funded more than a few of them. So when Tim came back with yet another idea, he went, okay, here's £10,000, and that's the last one I'm funding.
I did change the logo. That's all I've done so far.
Became the seed funds. And the original structure was simple. Creators set a monthly price, subscribers paid it, and the platform keeps 20%. And I guess the creator walks away with 80%. Tim's original pitch wasn't necessarily
that's why they're all rich
on adult content, but the idea had been open to anyone who could build a paying audience, including adult creators since 2017. And from the start, it was a family operation in the early days, with Tim's brother, Tom, running the operations, and their father, Guy, handling the finances. Guy,
Tim,
I guess,
Tom,
was
and
just
Guy.
their guy and father. And that one group, I guess they figured out the model faster than anyone else. And that showed up in some serious numbers, because in 2018, the platform was getting traction, but running headfirst into some structural problems. The payment processors that made it possible to, actually collect the money from the subscribers weren't a big fan.
So I'm not defending. OnlyFans by any account, but I am heavily against MasterCard and Visa not putting payments through for anything unless it's illegal. I don't feel like they should have that power, because if you give them that power, then who's to say, we don't want you to buy this product, so we're just not going to let you buy this product. And that's not okay. So I'm fully against all these credit card companies and stuff not being able to mess with your purchase history unless it's illegal, obviously.
And of the adult side of their business. And obviously, no payment processing means no business, full stop. So Tim sold it. And the buyer was someone that almost nobody had heard of, and nobody would really hear of him for many years to come. His name was Leonid Radvinsky, who was born in Odessa, Ukraine in 1982. His family relocated to Chicago while he was still a kid, and he studied economics at Northwestern University and graduated in 2002. And from that point forward, he essentially built an entire career at, scaling internet companies while keeping his name almost completely out of circulation. And even after he became the owner of one of the most talked about platforms on the planet, a single photo of him made the rounds, the same one over and over, which was attached to a LinkedIn profile that described him as the president at Leo.com and, completely left OF out of the picture. So essentially what we know about this guy is he lived in
it makes sense. You probably don't want to have an adult website, basically an adult website attached to your other places of business. I think that's the reason why somebody like Elon Musk wouldn't buy OnlyFans, is because some of his businesses like SpaceX or Tesla might be like, hey, that's not very marketable with what we're doing here.
$1 million waterfront.
So he probably just didn't want to attach to any of his other businesses.
He made no public statements. He was, I guess, for every practical purpose, someone who did not want to be found. What he was always doing, however, was running
which
his own
makes
things,
sense, like I said.
Building internet businesses since he was a teenager. And by his mid-20s, he'd built and operated more than 10 websites, developing a deep understanding in, I guess, the mechanics of adult content or entertainment and how that whole payment structure works and how he can get that to work without getting banned. And since he understood how this industry worked, when he was presented with the chance to buy, he did so in 2018 for $30 million. And it's safe to say that was a phenomenal investment for him, because in 2019,
insane.
The platform processed around $300 million in total payments and cleared around $7 million in profit. Then a year later, that gross payment volume hit $2.2 billion. Then by 2021, it was approaching $5 billion. And none of these numbers were being announced.
Okay, so yeah, it's safe to say he knew what he was doing.
But Leonid had no interest in turning any of these numbers into some massive press release like many other entrepreneurs would. But then came that moment that probably
because he probably is doing something that he doesn't want attached to OnlyFans.
The platform announced that it was going to ban explicit content. Now that was confusing to a lot of people.
He mentioned it too. That's what I was talking about.
If Burger King announced it was going to stop selling burgers. So why would they ever do that? Well,
it's because the deal didn't fall through.
A little bit later on when you get the full picture. But obviously, the response from the creators on their platform was immediate and very clear. So 6 days later, the ban was reversed, and I guess that just showed the creators that they're the product. They actually have the power here of this platform. Because at the end of the day, the platform cannot exist without the creators and the consumers paying for it. So the reason all this actually matters becomes a whole lot more clear once you look at the numbers, though. Because in 2024, they processed $7.2 billion in total transactions between the fans and the creators. OF's cut of that was about 20%, and that came out to $1.41 billion in net revenue.
And that's them taking 20%.
That is a behemoth of a company. But after expenses, pre-tax profit landed at $684 million, with the entire operation ran by only 46 full-time employees. That is insane. And then Leonid's personal payouts track the platform's growth as you would pretty much expect, because in 2021, he collected around $284 million. In 2022, he collected $338 million. In 2023, he collected $472 million. And then in 2024, he collected $701 million, which works out to about $2 million per day every day.
It's like $1.8 billion.
Which means the total earnings pulled between 2021 and 2024 were just
I couldn't imagine making $2 million a day.
Company that he
That's
paid
insane to even think
$30
about.
million for. That might be one of the best investments of all time. But at the same time, the distribution between the creators is wildly uneven because, you have this whole notion where a bunch of people would start an OF and make a whole bunch of money. But for the most part, that's not true. It's very similar to how Twitch is in a way. I don't really like drawing comparisons between Twitch and but
Why, Tozy? Why don't you like drawing comparison between Twitch and OnlyFans? Is it because Twitch is kind of similar in a way? Because, let's be real, ASMR is basically adult content.
You have a handful of top streamers on Twitch.
Thank you so much, Twitch, for giving me the opportunity to stream on your platform.
The average streamer makes way below minimum wage, and that's the case with as well. But I mean, that's just a whole nother topic for its own. But the thing is, by 2025, Leonid was looking for a buyer. And it didn't take long for him to realize, selling this platform is going to be a challenge. Because on paper, I mean, the investment is insane. Over $1.4 billion in annual net revenue, profit margins that most businesses would consider borderline unbelievable, roughly 380 million registered users, and fewer than 50 people on payroll. If you strip the context and handed someone the financial statements, they would assume they were looking at some sort of tech unicorn that had figured out everything. However, the context is the biggest problem here, because a large portion of the institutional investors, the ones with the actual capital to do a deal at this scale, they operate under something called vice clauses, which are restrictions embedded in their agreements with their own backers that prevent them from putting money into certain categories.
Yeah, that's what I was saying about with someone like Elon, like somebody who actually has the means to pay $7 billion for this company, probably doesn't have the backing of all their council members or people in positions on their board of directors or whatever.
I mean, these firms don't only use their own money. They have liquidity providers or people who invest money into them, and they operate as a hedge fund, and then they deploy other people's money with the end goal of, beating the S&P 500 in an annual return. And a lot of people just don't want their funds to go into, investing in these vice businesses, which considers adult content, tobacco, gambling, and weapons. So regardless of the numbers, a lot of the most obvious buyers are essentially blocked.
Which I get why a lot of companies and sponsors and stuff don't want to have all that stuff in there. I get it, because they want to keep a healthy image for the general public. But by golly, is that stuff so profitable?
From even writing the check. Then you have
I wouldn't do it. I have zero interest, but
Visa
my
and
gosh,
MasterCard, they've already shown that they could, threaten to cut off payment processing for adult platforms. And this is exactly what pushed OF towards its failed 2021 ban. And since the platform is almost entirely reliant on subscription revenue, it has to go through payment processors that take somewhere between 5 to 10% in fees on top of the 2 to 3% fees from the most regular, Visa and MasterCard.
I mean, banks and credit card places, guys,
that most regular businesses are
they're profiting off of us as bad as any scam and
that is
anything
a tax
else
on their margins, and now they're dependent to payment processors. And not only that, but there's also a regulatory pressure. So the UK communications regulator, they hit with a £1.4 million fine in early 2025.
Yeah, whoever buys OnlyFans, because I think the family's trying to get rid of it, whoever ends up buying it is going to have to apply for their own, some kind of banking accreditation or something, so they could just not have to deal with any of that.
Because even if someone bought it, how do they eventually sell it? Like, taking it public through a stock market listing, that's essentially impossible under the current conditions. And there's also no obvious second buyer standing by, and the insane financials don't resolve the fact that this is an asset most people in finance don't really want to be publicly associated with. And I mean, if I was to guess, that might be one of the reasons why they tried to stop allowing adult content on their platform back in 2021, plus the whole payment processors problem. So the asking price of the platform started at about $8 billion.
Could you imagine if OnlyFans came out and said, yeah, we're not doing adult content anymore, we're just everything else? What? Doesn't make any sense.
And no one was interested, despite their insanely high valuation. But the firm that eventually emerged as, I guess, the most serious buyer
that would be
was
insane.
Architect Capital, a San Francisco-based investment fund that got its start in 2020, providing credit to Latin American startups. And they had more recently become known for its tendency towards
Chick-fil-A. We're not selling chicken anymore. We're selling burgers, okay?
Sagan was one of the larger investors in Juul, a vaping and nicotine product that.
Actually, this is a wonderful point. Actually, because I think this is kind of like that, because Juul, when it first came out, there was no federal regulations by the government or the FDA or anything like that. And so they didn't know what to do with Juul. So Juul took off like crazy. Everybody was getting Juuls, this, that, and the third, and nobody could really do about it on a legal level. Kind of the same thing with AI, because the next 10 years, AI is not going to be regulated. until we start finding out some of the problems. And that's kind of what happened with Juul, is that the FDA and other people were just like, wait a second, we have a bunch of problems with this. We have teenagers that are getting this. You're making way too much money off of this. And then this, that, and the third. And so the FDA slapped a warning label on, and they basically killed Juul. And then what happened? Juul was nowhere to be found. And then all of a sudden, you saw all these other nicotine sticks that we have in today now. And so Juul had to get the death penalty so that all these other things had to survive. Got to survive.
You guys are probably familiar
survive
with
and thrive.
And honestly, that's just a whole nother video, because Juul completely took over the world like right
It
before
did.
the pandemic, and it definitely did extremely well during the pandemic. And then it seems like it kind of got like banned. At least most of their flavors got banned.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you had like Geek Bars.
I should just let him talk about it.
Off-brand versions of Juul, which arguably are worse, that kind of took over everything. But yeah, long story, but essentially Juul had its products pulled by the shelves by the FDA, and they later settled more than $1 billion in lawsuits over allegations that it was being marketed.
Yeah, because they lost so much.
It's safe to say that Architect's brand has some tolerance for risky investments. And the pitch Sagan made to the potential backers had two core ideas. First, diversify the platform, push it towards mainstream creator niches, and try to make it competitive with something like Patreon, rather than positioning it as purely an adult content site. Obviously, OF is primarily an adult content platform, and the majority of the traffic and subscriptions and the money.
I don't know if that would work.
And without that,
I don't know if that would work. It's too well known as being an adult
adult
site.
Competing in the space with YouTube, Patreon.
I don't think it could be like a
Spotify also
Patreon, or what's the other one?
Content and subscription models. But I feel like
what's the other kind of like
might even be
OnlyFans I can't
smaller
think
than
of right
Rumble
now.
if they tried to play in the non-adult space. Also, fun fact, since I'm mentioning Spotify, I was kind of forced to make a Spotify because some dude kept stealing my content and re-uploading it to Spotify. So if you want to enjoy my content on Spotify, you can do that as well. I'll leave a link
you can
down
upload
below
content on
so you guys know
Spotify?
that it's actually me.
I knew you
not
could
that
do
you're
like podcasts
impersonating
and
me.
stuff, but you could actually have
if you wanna
this.
leave a review there, that would also help me not get impersonated. But continuing the video, over the years, OF has genuinely been trying to build a safe for work.
Okay, so as a
platform,
podcast, okay,
including chefs, athletes, musicians, comedians, and fitness coaches. And they also launched their own safe for work streaming service called OFTV back in 2021. And they've actively been trying to pursue other partnerships since. But I don't really think any of it really took off. Though that is, again,
no, it'd be hard for them to sell.
Actually is. Then you have, the real competitors here, YouTube, Spotify, and Patreon. They don't allow any 18 plus content. And I don't see a world where OF is actually able to compete with any of these platforms in the safer work space because, the stigma that comes with the name. It's just like, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I just can't see most
it's
creators
too much
being
to
very
go
inclined to be
to
like,
get over.
hey guys, follow my unless they're paid like a massive bag. Yeah, it just doesn't make sense to me. But that problem will be something the new owner will have to inherit. And another step that they might need to do is acquire a banking license, because
yes, that's what I was saying.
Acquire OF, what happens
You
if
have
the payment
to.
processors shut them off? That would be really bad. So a potential
That was a
solution
dream of
for that
mine.
would be if the platform
At one point in time, I wanted to open up another credit card place so that you can just
that would definitely be
destroy
a massive
Visa
uphill
and
battle for them,
MasterCard.
though. But that would at least help them reduce the 5 to 10% fee burden. Currently,
That takes a
the
lot of work and a
valuation
lot
on
of
the
money.
table is $3.5 billion, with Architect taking 60% of the equity in the deal. So in just a few years, this has essentially lost $4.5 billion in valuation because no one wants to.
So if that's the case, so can you really evaluate a company at $7 billion if you can't get more than $3.5 billion for them? Isn't that just like a missed, like it was mislabeled kind of a thing?
The Wall Street Journal had originally reported a total deal value, including debt, at $5.5 billion, compared to
each
an
their
earlier
own.
$8 billion valuation just 1 year before, with slower growth and tougher sale process dragging the number down. And this number was apparently dragged down due to slower growth and just a tough sales process. But Sagan's $500 million fund wasn't nearly large enough to cover a deal of this size on its own. So he spent months going door to door trying to assemble the capital. And the family offices turned out to be the most receptive audience, largely because they don't really face the same restrictions that prevent more of the, mainstream funds from joining. And the deal was supposed to close by the end of March of this year. But then Leonid passed away, and everything just got way more complicated. Obviously, I don't want to...
Do you think another reason why the valuation went down too is because he knew he was dying of cancer and he tried to rush this so like his family didn't have to worry about it or something like that?
Sound disrespectful here, but terrible time. Just when everything seemed to align, he passed away. And this happened on March 20th, 2026 in Florida. And the platform made an announcement with a brief statement saying that he had passed away peacefully after a long battle with cancer. But his family asked for privacy and no details were shared. But what came out in the following days were how few people actually knew about how serious his condition was. And sources told the media that Leonid himself had driven the urgency behind the sale because of his health. Because the guy was apparently trying to get a deal closed specifically because he was concerned about leaving his family in a complicated situation without clear ownership. And as a part of that, in 2024, he transferred his stake of the company into a private trust, with his family being the expected beneficiaries. So obviously, if the deal with Architect Capital was already messy, it just got so much worse. Because the firm was still in the process of raising the equity it needed when Leonid passed. So it seems like the money simply just wasn't fully there. And suddenly now, investors who've been on the fence were dealing with a whole new layer of issues. Now you have estate laws, a different person now effectively in control of the asset, and deal terms would now have to be renegotiated with a trust.
This might crash them. This might crash the company.
The timeline that was already extended was pushed back once again. And as of this video, the deal remains open, and the future of right now is genuine uncertain, which is why it seems like the empire is collapsing. And the company has a current CEO. His name is Kelly Blair, who has been running the day-to-day operations. But what's clear is there's a lot of money at stake, a lot of different interests, and a company that, despite everything working against it, keeps printing cash at a rate that makes it very hard to ignore. So, I mean, it's safe to say whatever happens next will probably not be any more bizarre than the story of this company. I mean, the company's story is how a $10,000 loan from a dad with way too much patience suddenly turned into a $7 billion a year empire ran by some secret Ukrainian billionaire no one has ever heard of. I mean, come on, this is such a crazy story. And I feel like this is just a situation that no one's been talking about, because
crazy billionaire that can't get the company sold after he passed
like
away.
$1 billion a year. So I just wanted to come here and talk about it for a bit. So hey, if you're new here, my name's Atozy, or A to Z, and we talk about the laughably stupid stuff and the bizarre things that happen here on the internet. So if you're new here, feel free to subscribe, drop a like if you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.
Peace. That was a good video. That was a good video. And it will be interesting to see what happens and if the company can even be sold. And like, what do you do with a company that you want to sell and can't? I don't know. I don't know. Never had to be in those shoes. Hopefully never have to be in those shoes.